Chapter 7. The March of the Quendi. The text presented here occupies 12 sides of 7 sheets of unlined paper, which Tolkien lettered A to M. It is for the most part written in black nib pen in a fairly clear hand, but was subsequently given a new title, March, and revised and added to in places in red ballpoint pen. It dates from c. 1959. I give the text here as amended. Quendi. If we take VY 1000 as the probable date of the awakening and 1085 of the finding by Orome, 1090, beginning of the assault of the follower, 1102, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë brought to Valinor, 1105, beginning of the Great March, 1115, separation of the Nondor, 1125, Eldar reached Beleriand, 1130, Thingol lost, 1133, Vanyar and Noldor land in Aman, then we must consider the matter of the Eldar and the ages and position of Ingwe, etc. In 1085, Orome found already a considerable people who had already had dealings with emissaries of Melkor. According to Eldarin tradition, the Quendi awoke in maturity of body and had slept during the making of the Harrower in the womb of Arda, but when they awoke they were in 12 pairs, elf man and elf woman lying side by side, each with a predestined mate. After one Loa, they begat children, so that in awaking year 10, the first begotten or so-called first generation began to appear. The Quendi were at first eager to increase their kind. On the average, they begat children at the age of 40 and at average intervals of 24 years. In the first 3 generations, the number of children born to each pair was 6. In the next 3 generations, the average number was 5. In subsequent generations up to the Great March, the average number was 4. During the Great March, very few children were begotten, and there were no new marriages. The number of males and females was at first equal for about 3 generations, but more variable later when males tended to be slightly more numerous. First generation appears VY 1000 or 10, AY 10. In AY 10, 12 children were born. Total population then became 36 or 24 plus 12. The total population was 36. The first generation was complete in VY 1000 or 130 or AY 130. More children followed at intervals of 24 years until each pair produced 6 children. The first elves then ceased to beget. Thus, in 5 times 24 plus 10 equals AY 130, the first generation was complete. It was 72. Total population was now 24 plus 72 equals 96. Thus, the total population was 96. Second generation appears VY 1018 or 19 or AY 2611. The first generation began to beget children when 40 years old. That is, the first 6 pairs of the 36 pairs of the first generation began in AY 10 plus 288 equals 24 GY plus 2304 equals 16 VY. SC in 18 VY plus 10 Loar after the awakening, so allowing for approximately 9 years of gestation. The first 6 of the second generation would appear in 18 VY plus 19 Loar after the awakening. Second generation complete in VY 1018 or 139 or AY 2731. The last 6, the last children of the youngest of the first generation, would appear in 18 VY plus 10 Loar plus 5 times 24 Loar plus 9 Loar equals 18 VY plus 139 Loar. The population increase would be 6 times 36 equals 216. Thus, the total population would be 312. The third generation appears VY 1036 or 28 or AY 5212. The second generation will begin to produce the next generation in 48 years after the appearance of the second generation. Footnote 1. This sentence continues in the MS with, that is, in VY 1018 plus 19 lower, but this is impossible since the second generation itself appeared in that year. End footnote. There were 216 of the second generation, or 108 pairs. The time of generation completion from first birth to last birth would be as before 120 lower, or 5 times 24. The third generation would thus begin to appear in VY 1018 or 19 plus 18 VY or 9 lower. Third generation complete, VY 1037 or 14 or AY 5342. The last of the third generation would appear in VY 1018 or 19 plus 18 VY or 139 lower, or VY 1037 or 14. The increase was 6 times 108 equals 648. Thus, the total population would be 960. The number of children per pair now drops to 5, and pairing is not exact. The interval between children also increased to about 30. So, total time to produce the fourth generation with the same 120 lower. Fourth generation appears VY 1054 or 37 or AY 7813. The third generation begins to produce the fourth generation in VY 1036 or 28 plus VY 18, and the first of the fourth generation would appear in VY 1036 or 28 plus VY 18 over 9 equals VY 1054 or 37. Fourth generation complete, VY 1055 or 13 or AY 7933. The fourth generation will be complete and 120 lower later equals VY 1054 or 37 plus AY 120 equals VY 1054 or 157 equals VY 1055 or 13. The population increase was 5 times 150 equals 750. Thus, the total population would be 1710. The fifth generation appears VY 1072 or 46 or AY 10,414. In VY 1054 or 37 plus VY 18 or 9, the fifth generation began to appear VY 1072 or 46. There were 750 in the fourth generation, of which about 700 or 350 pairs mated. Fifth generation complete, VY 1073 or 22 or AY 10,534. The generation was complete in VY 1072 or 46 plus 120 lower equals VY 1073 or 22. Footnote 2. Tolkien here actually wrote VY 1073 or 24, which is a calculation error since 46 plus 120 minus 144 equals 22. End footnote. Increase. 5 times 350 equals 1750. Thus, the total population would be 3,460. Sixth generation appears VY 1090 or 55 or AY 13,015. In VY 1072 or 46 plus VY 18 or 9, the sixth generation appear equals VY 1090 or 55. There were 1750 in the fifth generation, of which about 800 pairs mated. Sixth generation complete, VY 1091 or 31 or AY 13,135. The generation was complete in VY 1090 or 55 plus 120 lower equals VY 1091 or 31. Increase 5 times 800 equals 4,000. The total in 1090, or about the time of the assault on Melkor, about 7,000. Footnote 3. Tolkien marked this as a crucial point with a large star. End footnote. At time of the finding by Orme in 1085, only 3,460. Thus, the total population is 7,460. The number of children prepared now drops to 4, but the completion of a generation takes about 100 lower. Seventh generation appears VY 1108 or 64 or AY 15,616. The seventh generation begins to appear in VY 1090 or 55 plus VY 18 or 9 equals VY 1108 or 64. Of the 4,000 members of the sixth generation, about 1,900 pairs beget 4 children each. The seventh generation complete VY 1109 or 20 or AY 15,716. The generation is complete in VY 1108 or 64 plus 100 lower equals 1109 or 20. Increase 4 times 1900 equals 7,600. Thus, the total population is 15,060. The youngest of the seventh generation will be active and able to march in some 10 growth years equals 120 lower, SC VY 1109 or 140 or say VY 1110. The dates for the march, etc., given in the tale of years, are devised to fit scale 10 lower equals 1 VY, but even so are too long. The Eldar take 20 VY equals 200 sun years to reach Beleriand, but we must imagine many long halts and waverings. Also, the Eldar still desired children and no doubt begot many on the march, but they would halt for this purpose. Halts would occupy at least 10 sun years, or gestation 9 plus mother's rest plus 10 growth years, 120 SY equals 130 lower for youngest children to grow to marching age. Footnote 4. As first written, this sentence concluded, at least 10 years, gestation 9 plus mother's rest, more likely 20, there followed, or if a whole generation or time of children struck through in the act of writing. End footnote. They would then march on during an interval of about 30 sun years and halt 130 lower again. Footnote 5. As first written, this sentence ended and halt 20 again. End footnote. Let us say the march began in VY 1110 when the total number of Quendi was about 15,000. Suppose 10,000 marched Eldar and 5,000 Avari remained. Ingar 1,000, Noldor 3,500, Teleri 5,500, later Lindar, Sindar, Nandor. Footnote 6. That is, these Teleri and their descendants later became the Lindar, Sindar, and Nandor of Beleriand. For the name Ingar, the people of Ingwe, i.e. the Vanyar, see the introduction to this part of the book. End footnote. Distance. Beleriand was about 550 miles broad from Eglarest to the mountains of Lune. From the mountains of Lune to the Sea of Rune is, according to the LR map, over 1,250 miles, total 1,750 miles. How far east or southeast of the Sea of Rune was Cuivienen? Footnote 7. Tolkien here actually wrote, how far W or SW of Sea of Rune was Cuivienen, but this must be a slip, since in no account of the awakening was Cuivienen ever west of the Sea of Rune, and, as will be seen, the Eldar here too reached the shores of the Sea of Rune from the east. End footnote. If we say in ancient days that Cuivienen was 2,000 miles as the crow flies from the coast of ancient Beleriand, this will be approximately right. Let 10,000 Eldar set out at the beginning of VY 1110. The beginning of the 8th generation is due to begin in VY 1108 or 64 plus VY 18 or 9 equals VY 1126 or 73. But then 16 VY equals 2,304 sun years will have elapsed. It could begin in VY 1108 or 64 plus 2 VY equals VY 1110 or 64 when the 7th generation will be 24 growth years, 288 lower old. Footnote 8. This last sentence, represented here as a parenthetical comment, was a late addition in red ballpoint pen. End footnote. Clearly, either no more children are begotten before reaching Valinor, or the march must have been delayed. 8th generation appears VY 1126 or 73 or AY 18,217. The 8th generation begins in VY 1126 or 73. The 7th generation contained 7,600 persons. Of these, let 3,500 pairs marry. 8th generation complete VY 1127 or 29 or AY 18,317. The generation will be complete in 1126 or 73 plus 100 lower equals VY 1127 or 29. The increase will be 3,500 times 4 equals 14,000. Thus the total population will be 29,060. Let the march begin when the youngest of the 8th generation are at least 10 growth years old equals 120 solar years. So in VY 1127 or 29 plus 120. This is in VY 1128 or 5 or early in 1129. Let 20,000 march, leaving 9,060 or about 9,000 Avari. Ingard 2,000, Noldor 7,000, Teleri 11,000. No more beginning of the 9th generation will occur regularly until VY 1126 or 73 plus 18 or 9 equals VY 1142 or 82. But it can begin in 1126 or 73 plus 2 VY equals 1128. Footnote 9. This final sentence entered as a later, faint addition in red ballpoint pen. End footnote. Of these 20,000, 14,000 times 2/3 will be above 11 or 10 growth years old. 7,600 times 2/3 will be 81. 1,750 times 2/3 will be 120, etc. So, over 9,000 young children's age would be GY 11/10. Over 5,600 young adults whose ages are 40 plus, over 2,700 full grown whose ages are 80 plus, over 1,200 prime ages are 120 plus, over 500 prime whose ages are 160 plus, over 400 prime whose ages are 200 plus, 144 prime who are 240 plus, 48 prime who are 300 plus, and 24 prime who are 340 plus. The running total would be 19,616, with 9,000 children and 11,000 adults. Too many children, so probably delay march until maturity, 288 sun years after the birth of the youngest of the 8th generation. If 1127 or 29 plus 2 VY equals 288 sun years equals 1129 or 29, or early 1129. The youngest marchers will be 24 growth years, 288 sun years old, the oldest 168 lower or 1 VY or 24 older. but beginning of a 9th generation would now be possible for, say, 4,000 pairs of the 8th generation. 8th generation VY 1129 or 29 or AY 18,605. Progress towards C at 450 miles. The march begins in VY 1129 or LOA 29. The great host of 20,000 goes very slowly, 2,000 miles to go. Footnote 10. That is, 2,000 miles as the crow flies, as previously stipulated. The actual course of the journey, as will be seen, is much longer than this. End footnote. It has to provide food, clothing, etc. en route, though it had the help of the Valar via Orme. Asterisk. A marginal note apparently referring to the other Valar reads, others occupied with were, and asterisk. It proceeds mainly in the late spring to early autumn, April to September. The general process is to make a period of marching and then to halt for repairs, cloth making, or fur curing, and rest. The march began about April 1st of LOA 29 of VY 1129, thus well provided to start. It goes about 200 miles by the end of April, halts, then goes on again from June 20 to July 20 with 200 more miles, total 400. It is now near the east side of the Sea of Rune and a very pleasant place. After some debate, it moves to the shores of the Sea of Rune, total 450 miles, and there stops during the rest of LOA 29 and does not move on again, because many are for the time being content and desire to beget children. Population of marchers was 20,000. 9th generation begins BY 1129 or 39 or AY 18,615. Of the available 4,500 8th generation pairs, 2,000 beget children in the spring of LOA 30. They, 2,000, are born in the spring of LOA 39 or VY 1129 or 39. The host therefore does not move again for 10 growth years more equals 120 LOA, VY 1129 or 159 equals VY 1130 or 15. It is now combined with 2,000 young children of about GY 11 or 11 age. The population of marchers is 22,000. VY 1130 or 15, AY 18,735. Progress towards C was 650 miles. In spring and summer of VY 1130 or 15, it only moves 200 miles, 650 total. It camps in what are the wide grasslands before Mirkwood is reached, and full of grain and food. The elves taught by Orme sow grain that autumn and reap in summer of 1130 or 16. They do this 3 times till 1130 or 19 and do not move on until spring 1130 or 20. VY 1130 or 20, AY 18,740. The progress towards C is 800 miles. That year, they reached a great forest, another 200 miles. This looks a lovely place, but they find it contains lurking evils. Possibly Sauron is aware of the march. Anyway, many of Melkor's evils are abroad. Some Eldar are lost, the rest are afraid. They retire back into the grasslands 50 miles. 850 minus 50 equals 800 and await help from Orme. Orme comes in 1130 or 25 and drives off the evils and encourages the Eldar. VY 1130 or 26, AY 18,746. The progress towards C is 1,050 miles. The Ingar and the Noldor following Nahar pass through the great forest, rich in fruit and berries. at its southern end, which was farther south than in the Third Age, during 1130 or 26. They come out into the Anduin Vale and are delighted with it. Their chieftains cannot get them to proceed further at that time. Their general thought is, why not dwell here and let the Valar guard us? This is where Quendi should dwell, between wood and water. Only the chiefs who had seen Amon are not content. The Lindar here begin to straggle. Not all had reached the east side of the forest when the Ingar and Noldor went through. None have yet followed Orome. VY 1130 or 36, AY 18,756. The Ingar and Noldor settle on the east bank of the Anduin, the region of later Lorien. They rest till spring 1130 or 27. Then a new begetting of children begins. Available pairs of the Ingar and Noldor are about 4,000. The total 8th generation equals 14,000, but 1/3 are Avari, leaving about 9,000 Eldar, 9/20th, of which equals 450 times 9 equals 4,050 available pairs. 2,000 pairs beget children, 1,000 first time, 1,000 second time, who are born in spring of 1130 or 36. The Eldar like their life there. The presence of the Maiar drives off evil, and the place is rich in flowers and food. Footnote 11. Maiar is a seldom used form of the name Maiar that appears to have arisen in linguistic notes dating from 1957, PE 17, 124, 149, SV root Ion, and CF 145 SVADA for the date. The Maiar in question are not here named, but see the entry for DB 866 or 13 in chapter 13 key dates below. End footnote. In spite of the chiefs, they are unwilling to move. VY 1130 or 79, AY 18,799. They linger till 1130 or 70 and then begin new begetting 2,000 pairs. Further bursts of the 9th generation appear in spring 1130 or 79. The Teleri now begin to appear. They left the grasslands and came round south of the forest. They like the new home and are now eager for more children. VY 1130 or 89 or AY 18,809. About 2,000 pairs of the available Telerian 8th generation of 4,950 beget children in spring 1130 or 80. The chiefs and Orome are disturbed. No move can be made until the latest children are above 10 GY, as C in 1130 or 89 plus 120 equals 1130 or 209 equals 1131 or 65. The population of marchers is 28,000. VY 1130 or 90 or AY 18,810. Either by chance, machinations of Sauron, and or because Orome withdraws protection, hoping to make the Eldar less content with their new home, Atiamar. Footnote 12. Atiamar in Quenya is literally second home. End footnote. Winters are hard and the weather worsens. The host is now burdened with many young born between 1129 or 39 and 1130 or 89. The oldest are those that, in 1131 or 65, will be VY2 or 26 years old, equals 314 Loar. Footnote 13. Tolkien here actually wrote 2/26 years old equals 166 Loar equals 13 Loar 10 months, but this is irreconcilable with the record and the mathematics. End footnote. The youngest about 10 GY. The total of these is 8,000 in a total host of 28,000. The chiefs order an advance across the Anduin for spring 1130 or 91. The Teleri already show a love of water and boats and begin a great boat building. They are ready with rafts and boats in the course of 1130 or 90, but a large part of the Teleri later fought this in the winter of 1130 or 90 to 91. The Anduin is wild and flooded, and great snowstorms fall in the misty mountains, then much taller, which lasts far into the spring. The total Talarian host is 13,000 now. More than 3,000 refuse to leave Yammer. These are the Nondor. Asterisk. It is said that many remained here for thousands of years, but others migrated, some eventually going south down the Anduin and settling on the shores south of the White Mountains, especially in later Belfast. Others went on along the coast until a number, and Denethor came up into southeast Beleriand. And asterisk. Footnote 14. Denethor, cf. S54, 94-6, X93, XI 13. And footnote. VY 1130 or 91, AY 18,811. The progress towards sea is 1,150 miles. The host, now 25,000 strong, moves across the Anduin, but finds the Hithaglir impassable. Some are lost in the attempt. Eventually, they wander south through woods into the plain of later Rohan, Kalanardon. Footnote 15. Here a curious element enters a new scheme of the Great March at sea, that none of the Eldar cross the misty mountains Hithaglir into Eriador after crossing the Anduin, but instead the whole host, save some 3,000 Nondor, turned south down the Anduin. In contrast, the Silmarillion recounts S54 and CFX 82-3 entry for YT 1115. Now the Teleri abode long on the east bank of that river, the Anduin, and wished to remain there, but the Vanya and the Noldor passed over it, and Orme led them into the passes of the mountains, the Hithaglir, and further that the Teleri too eventually pass over the mountains as 54, and the host of the Teleri pass over the misty mountains and cross the wildlands of Eriador. And footnote. The Teleri lag again. VY 1130 or 95, AY 18,815. Progress towards sea is 1850 miles. The Ingar and Noldor settle at last about the Isen, near later Isengard. The wandering has taken about 4 Loar, 1130 or 95. The main host halts for a long while. The Teleri straggle in. Footnote 16. Originally, this sentence continued before being struck through, but many go down to the sea at Eisenmouth. Orme eventually gets them to go, saying that they can dwell by the sea long at their journey's end, and that the Valar want them to go northwards to Eisenmouth. Here must refer to the mouth of the river Eisen Angren, and not the Kark Angren Jaws of Iron, Eisenmouth of later Mordor, CLR 920. 927-8. If so, this original continuation implies that in the First Age, the river Eisen emptied into the Belagir at or about the same latitude and longitude that it does in the Third Age, despite the submergence of vast amounts of the western lands of Beleriand in the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age. The realization of this implication of the passage no doubt occasioned its deletion in the act of writing and the note that immediately follows. End footnote. NB. All the coast south of the Haradwaith originally extended much farther west, before the ruin of Beleriand and later Numenor, so that they are still very far from the sea, which they do not see or hear about. VY 1130 or 109, AY 18,829. A new begetting of children begins in 1130 or 100. Some are concluding the 9th generation, some being 4th or Talarian's 2nd children. New occasions of 9th generation appear in 1130 or 109. Available 8th generation pairs, 6,000, less 900 Nandor, about 3,500 pairs, beget children. Footnote 17. The last 2 sentences are additions in red ballpoint pen and roughly written. The number of available 8th generation pairs appears to have originally been 8,000, and the number of begetting pairs 4,000. And footnote. The population of marchers is 28,500. VY 1131 or 5, or AY 18,869. A new begetting began in 1130 or 140, but not so many produced children. Some have already produced 4. Also, women are getting unruly because of difficulties of children, and many are eager now to go on. 2,000 pairs produced 2,000 children in 1130 or 149 equals 1131 or 5. Footnote 18. Tolkien actually wrote 1131 or 9 here, but that is an error. End footnote. Orome is impatient. They wait nonetheless until the youngest children are 12 GY, that is 144 sun years, equals 1 VY equals VY 1132 or 5. Population of marchers is 30,500. VY 1132 or 9 or AY 19,017. The progress towards sea is 2,110 miles. The Eldar scheme to beget no more children till Beleriand. The hosts of the Ingar and Noldor move west till it comes to Gwathlo, about 260 miles, at the end of 1132 or 9. VY 1132 or 11. AY 19,019. The progress towards sea is 2,310 miles. Here they wait for the first of the lagging Teleri, who come up in 1132 or 10 and help the Ingar and Noldor across. All way, and rest comes slowly on behind. The Ingar and Noldor reach the Barren Dune in 1132 or 11. They are now near the southern end of the Ered Luin. Footnote 19. Here again, in consequence of the southerly route, the host takes to avoid crossing the Misty Mountains in its subsequent passing through the latter named Gap of Rohan at the southern end of the mountains. The host enters Beleriand below the southern end of the Ered Luin, whereas in the Silmarillion the various bodies of the whole host cross over the Ered Luin at different times at a much more northerly point. S54 and CF X83 entry for YT 1125. At length the Vanya and the Noldor came over Ered Luin, the blue mountains between Eriador and the westernmost land of Middle-earth, which the elves after named Beleriand, and the foremost companies passed over the Vale of Sirion and came down to the shores of the great sea between Drangis and the Bay of Balar. Thus, after many years, the Teleri also came at last over Ered Luin into the eastern regions of Beleriand. Accounts of the Great March prior to this give the impression that it proceeded more or less straight from east to west at about the mid-latitude of the Misty Mountains, and so much closer to the latitude of Doriath. Given this new, more circuitous, and much more southerly route, it seems difficult to understand why, after entering Beleriand at the southern end of the Ered Luin, the host would deviate so far north as to reach the area of Doriath. As Orome at least must have known, the Bay of Balar directly to their west was much closer than the Valas or Nevrost, and in the event became their point of departure from Middle-earth to Valinor. End footnote. VY 1132 or 17, AY 19,025. The progress towards sea is 3,111 miles. They are led in 1132 or 12 to eastern Beleriand, which is safe. In the next few years, they accomplish about 800 miles by drawing about to the area of western Doria. Say about 1132 or 17, they reach the coast of Beleriand. Footnote 20. Tolkien here actually wrote, say about 1132 or 17, they are in Beleriand, but since the main hosts enter Beleriand in VY 1132 or 12, and since Tolkien next writes, marches over, and then writes further below, the Eldar reached coast in 1132 or 17, I've used the latter to clarify what seems to be the actual intent here. And footnote. The march is over. VY 1132 or 20 or AY 19,028. The Lindar or Tuleria are eager for the sea and push west to the falls or Nevrast. The Noldor and Ingar chiefly inhabit the area about Sirion. About 1132 or 20, all the Eldar of the main hosts are in Beleriand, in total 30,000. Now begins negotiation for transport. Having at last brought the host of the Great March to the coast of Beleriand, and having detailed the time it took and their population increase along the way, Tolkien goes on to compare this new scheme with that of the scheme of the Tale of Years, CX 49, 56-7, and to consider its implications, particularly as arising from Finwë's abstaining from wedding before reaching Aman. In the Tale of Years, the Eldar reached the coast in VY 1125, only 20 VY equals 200 sun years on the march. Footnote 21. CFX 81-3, where the Great Journey starts in YT 1105 and ends in 1125. As Tolkien notes in the scheme of the earlier Tale of Years, 20 VY equals 200 sun years, not 2880 as here. End footnote. Ulmo takes the Ingar and Noldor in 1132. They arrive in Aman in 1133. The Teleri leave in 1150. VY here, i.e. in the Tale of Years, equals 10 sun years. The Eldar, Ingar, and Noldor only abide in Beleriand 7 times 10 equals 70 sun years. It only takes 10 sun years to cross the Great Sea. The Teleri depart 180 sun years later. Except for passage of the Great Sea, these lengths of time are sufficient. In the above scheme, the Eldar reached the coast in 1132 or 17. The march began in 1129 or 29. They were nearly 3 VY in migration for 20 sun years. They should abide 1 VY 1133 or 17 before the Ingar and Noldor depart. Transit across the Great Sea equals 12 sun years. The Teleri now go to the shores and are befriended by Alsei. Part of the Teleri and Olwe are taken off in 1134. In the Tale of Years, Finwë begets Fëanor in 1160, and he is born in VY 1169. Footnote 22, CFX 101 and 1. End footnote. This is, according to TY scale, 27 VY equals 270 sun years after Finwë's arrival in Valinor. Footnote 23, CFX 84, 67, which assigns 1133 as a year when the Vanyar and Noldor arrived in Aman. This is indeed 27 VY before the beginning of Fëanor by Finwë and Miriel, but 36 VY before his birth, and so appears to be what Tolkien is referring to here by this. And footnote. Where in the present scheme did the chieftains come in? Ingwe, Finwë, Elwë, Olwe? If first elves, they awoke in VY 1000, being approximately 24 age years old. In VY 1133 or 29, they reach Valinor. They are then 24 plus 133 or 29. VY old equals 24 plus 133 equals 157 age years. Actually, 288 plus 19,152 equals 19,440 sun years. Clearly, Finwë cannot wed in Aman unless the arrangement of elvish lives is altered. It could be altered satisfactorily in this way. The Eldar, especially in the early ages, do not wed or beget until late and may be at least 200 years old. 2. They do not necessarily beget in consecutive times of the children, but may beget in any suitable or peaceful time at will. But they do not beget when past Heroa prime, which was, in the elder days, about 200 age years, but this dwindled. In the second age, it was 150, in third age, 100. Ingwe, Finwë, etc. could postpone wedding till arrival, and probably did not expect to be so long on the road. If so, however, it might be a good thing to have few weddings on the march. But Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë being special cases as the only ones who had yet seen Aman, and so desired their children to be born there, they could be among the few who abstained, i.e. from wedding before and during the march. If there are few weddings on the march, then either elves must awake longer than 82 BY before their finding, or far more must be created, 144 or 72 pairs, or 144 pairs. But in any case, how would Ingwe, etc., or any first elf know if what was going to happen so as to postpone marriage? How could Elwe, Olwe, Elmo be brothers? Fairly clearly, then, Ingwe, etc., are not first elves. What then became of older generations? This can be got over. The Quendi, at first, the 3 generations, were very philoprogenitive. They mated almost at once with their predestined mates. It was not for some time when their young, experienced fair began to take command, but their other faculties demanded fulfillment, and they began to be absorbed in the study of Arda. Footnote 24. Draft material for this passage reads, when Quendi were very young in Arda, they were far more like men than fallen, or indeed grown-up children. The heroa and the delights of the body of all kinds were dominant and full of vigor, and their fair only beginning to grow and wake and discover their powers. So they were far more progenitive and less exhausted by the production of children. Cf. The opening paragraph of the text presented in Chapter 5, Natural Youth and Growth of the Quendi above. On the unfallen nature of the Quendi, see The Fall of Man in Appendix 1. And footnote. The younger generations therefore progressed rapidly in strength, nobility, and intellectuality of character, and made natural leaders. First few generations, expending much vigor in begetting, were least adventurous and were nearly all Abari in the event. Secondly, in any case, elvish lords or kings, as Numenorians later, tended to hand on lordship and affairs to their descendants if they could or were engrossed in some pursuit. Often, though we don't see it in Beleriand since a war occupied so short a span of elvish time, and lords and kings were so often slain, after passing 200 age years they would resign. It would thus be young, eager Quendi of some later generations whose fathers or grandfathers were lords, who were chosen and were willing to go as ambassadors to Amon, after which they would be preeminent and obvious leaders of the march. The light of Amon was in their faces, and the other elves were in all of them. Against this paragraph, Tolkien placed a large star and added a note. This is better than making the ambassadors different from the later leaders. He also drew vertical lines against the last 2 paragraphs on this page, and in the upper left-hand corner he further added the word important, indicating his enthusiasm for these solutions. Important indeed, as these solutions to the problems of 1. Reducing the number of weddings and thus begettings of the Eldar on the march, while 2. Still having sufficient numbers of elves to believably populate both Amon and Beleriand, and 3. Allowing Finwë to still be of marriageable and begetting age when he arrives in Amon within the age-year scheme laid out in these papers, turn out to have been the germ of the legend of the awakening of the Quendi, Cuivignarna, given at XI 424. 4 on the pages that immediately followed this discussion are the germ and the rough working out of the mechanics of that legend beginning. The first elves awaking in BY 1000 should be 144, 72 pairs of destined spouses. But they did not all wake at once from sleep in the womb of Arda. There were 3 first elves known in later legend as Imin, Tata, and Enel, from whom the Eldar said the words for 1, 2, and 3 were made, but the reverse was probably the historical fact. It is apparently here that the names and figures of Imin, Tata, and Enel as the first 3 male elves to awake first arose. For the continuation of the development of this legend, see the next chapter.